So hello everyone, welcome to the Umbrellas webinar. We currently have a poll on our chat, so feel free to answer those questions for us. So I'm going to do a brief introduction about the umbrella, and then I'll hand the talk over to Rob. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have a question and answer session. And we urge you to please ask on-topic questions. This webinar will be recorded and the video will be available on our YouTube channel in 24 hours. About the umbrella, we are a community for underrepresented persons in data science, and we are a non-profit organization. About me, my name is Beryl Kanali. I'm a statistician and data scientist. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and GitHub as Beryl Kanali. We also have a code of conduct, and we thank you for helping make the umbrella a welcoming and friendly community to all. So you can support the umbrella by following our code of conduct. You can also join us on Discord, where you'll get to answer and ask questions, share events, job opportunities, and other resources. You can also donate to the umbrella. We are an open collective as the umbrella. We are also on Benevity, which is a company match-enabled platform where you'll make a donation and your company or organization will be able to match it. We also have a YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and see the videos to all the webinars we've held and other videos on data science related materials. Our YouTube also has some awesome playlists like the career advice playlist, which is a popular one. We also have other playlists on data science for beginners, contributing to open source, and data visualization. You can also sign up for a monthly newsletter to know what events we have done during the month and upcoming events. Our newsletters are on Substack, and our URL is thatumbrella.substack.com. We also have our website. Our website is thatumbrella.org, where we have resources on open source, accessibility and responsibility, burnout, and many more. We are also on all social media platforms as Data Umbrella. You can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, where we post Data Umbrella resources. We also are on Meetup, where you'll get to see our upcoming events and sign up for them. We also have a blog where we post some resources related to data science. This webinar also has live captioning. On the right side of your screen, there is a menu button labeled CC, so you can click on that to get live captioning as the webinar proceeds. We also have some upcoming events that you can find on our Meetup page. One of them is Intro to GraphQL for Data Scientists, which will be on April 26th, and Intro to PyTorch will be on May 10th. So today's talk is on editing Wikipedia because someone has to, and our speaker is Rob Lanphier. Rob is a graduate of University of Idaho, where he earned a bachelor's degree in computer science back in the days of the internet. After college, he moved to Washington, where he worked in companies like Microsoft, Conjagi, and Real Networks, while still practicing his hobby of editing Wikipedia. While at Real Networks, one of his colleagues, Philip, moved to San Francisco's Linden Street, where he created Linden Lab and virtual world known as Second Life. Rob finally convinced Philip to set up a Seattle office, from which he directed Linden's open source activities for 3 years. In 2010, Wikipedia Foundation noticed that Rob had been an editor since the very early days of Wikipedia, that is 2001, and they hired him to manage employees outside of San Francisco. After leaving Wikipedia Foundation, Rob still edited Wikipedia even while working elsewhere. So you can find him on LinkedIn, Twitter, and GitHub. On that note, so I'll hand over to Rob to start our webinar. And remember, we have a poll on our chat where you can answer some questions to help Rob have a better understanding of our audience. And at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. So if you have any question, just write them down on the chat, and I and Rob will attend to them at the end. So thank you. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Beryl. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Lanphier, and hopefully you can hear me, and hopefully the echo is not too bad here. I'm going to try to share the screen here 1 second. Let's see if this actually works. Okay, there we go. All right. There, and hopefully we can, yes. Good. Okay. And hi, everyone. Like Beryl said, I'm Rob Lanphier. I am been a Wikipedia editor since 2001. The more important thing for you to know is that my username is Robla, R, capital R, lowercase o, lowercase b, capital L, lowercase a. And we'll get to that in a second. But just double checking that my screen sharing works for everybody. Just say something in chat if it looks good. I'm okay. Yeah, good. Yeah. All right. So one big disclaimer I'm going to put up front in this is that editing on Wikipedia is a matter of perspective. Everybody's going to have a different experience. So this is true for everything in life, but it is especially true on editing Wikipedia. So, and just to give you an example of how things are different, I originally decided I was going to use this metaphor of the blind man and the elephant. If I'm going to assume everybody knows it, but if you don't, I'll just very quickly describe it. It's basically 4 blind men or 5 or however many encounter an elephant, and they don't know what they've encountered, and so they're feeling around the elephant, which feels a little bit dangerous, but we'll go with it. And it's a very patient elephant, and they're describing what they're feeling to each other. One person feels the leg and says, well, it feels like a snake, and so on and so forth. So how does one cite this story? How does one create a citation to describe what the story is? Well, do you do it by URL? Do you do it by sort of traditional book citation? And which of those do you choose? And I think that's one of the things where people, where it's very easy to fall into a trap of like deciding, is the person who actually made the illustration more important, or is the person who actually thought of the story more important? the depth of just thinking about like how do you do a proper citation is very difficult. So so with that, I'm just going to describe a little bit more about me. I've like I said, I've been an editor of English Wikipedia since the very early days, since 2001, which was when Wikipedia was started. I've also managed other wikis, for example, ElectoWiki, which is still a very active wiki. I'm not the only editor on that one. And I was also at Wikimedia Foundation, which is the nonprofit organization that's responsible for hosting Wikipedia. I was there from 2010 until 2016. And I was also a member of the board of a small UK-based non-profit named Myrahes in 2020 and 2021, which offers free wikis to anybody who wants to start up a public wiki of their own. So with that, I will very briefly describe what Wikipedia is. It is a freely available, multilingual, online encyclopedia that is free, not just in terms of cost, it's just like free beer, right? But it's also free as in freedom, as in or free speech. So it's basically part of the commons. It's part of the public good as well. It's free as in air and water and that sort of thing. So now I said it's a multilingual encyclopedia, and that's true. However, the 800-pound gorilla is that English Wikipedia is the biggest. It is the biggest and most popular. It's the oldest. There's a total of 58 million articles on Wikipedia, of which 6 million articles are on the English Wikipedia. So even though there are over 300 languages, it's a long tail. There's English is the big one, and then there are several other wikis, for example, Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Japanese, Russian, and Spanish, that are also big wikis. They have over 1 million articles, but English is by far and away the biggest. Regardless, all of them have plenty of incorrect information on them, and we need editors out there correcting them. We need you. We need everybody to help out and make this common good better. And so the polling questions, I'm just going to go through the poll. Let's see here. So hopefully you've all had a chance to look at the poll. Let's see here. So whoops, looks like there was one of the options was missing, which I probably screwed up by not allowing or probably having too many options. But it looks as though it looks like nobody has said they've never heard of Wikipedia, which is good. But there are several people who have said they've never edited Wikipedia, this is kind of the expected result that I was expecting to see, was that there's so many people who have heard of it, who've used it, who've visited the website, who maybe even relied on it to graduate from whatever degree they were getting, but have never edited it. And that's one of the things I want to encourage you to do, is to edit, because editing, I've learned so much by editing Wikipedia, and I'm hoping that you can as well. Before I get into the weeds about editing, I want to just give you sort of my weird unofficial history of Wikipedia. So in 1996, a little company in Florida named Bombas was founded. It was started by Jimmy Wales, and Bombas was basically a small sort of portal, because back in the late 90s, that was the big thing, was to try to be a sort of generic information source portal. And Bombas was right in there with everybody else trying to do that. In 1999, Bombas started Nupedia. And what Nupedia was more of a best current practices version of a free online encyclopedia. So they were trying to build something free, but they were also trying to do all sorts of, like, they wanted to make sure that it was reviewed by experts and had a complicated process for reviewing every article. And unfortunately, what that meant was it was very slow. The article creation was incredibly slow. So in 2001, Bombas had heard of this thing called these things called wikis, and I won't get into the history of wikis, but they decided to try these things out. Which person was responsible for that? Hard to say, based on some of the evidence there. Jimmy Wales was the owner and founder of Bombas and had hired Larry Sanger. Both of them want to take credit for what happened. Nobody knows for sure what exactly happened, but regardless, it happened in 2001, and it took the world by storm. Already by March, a second language, German Wikipedia, was formed, and then the tragic events of September 11th, 2001 had a weird little side effect, which is it caused a lot of people to congregate on Wikipedia to find out what the heck was going on. And so Wikipedia got a lot of new editors in that first year, just due to the strange events of the year. So then what happened was sort of Bombas's role became less and less, and a nonprofit was formed in 2003. In 2004, Jimmy Wales also started a for-profit called Wikia, and so there was both the nonprofit Wikimedia Foundation, which was started, which you'll see referred to as WMF, and then additionally, and by the way, so Wikimedia Foundation was formed in Florida, sort of as a spin-off of Bombas, but over time, what happened was Wikimedia Foundation, so Wikipedia grew like crazy during that first decade, during the 2000s. But the staff was still a pretty small staff. You can see the office and the set of people standing there. It was, it'd become a top 10 website, but yet had not become an enormous organization. Thankfully, in the next 10 years, Wikimedia Foundation did get bigger to sort of be able to deal with this stuff, and I was part of that sort of hiring binge that happened during the 2010s, and then I believe the hiring has sort of leveled off, but regardless, it's not a huge organization. But it's a much bigger organization than it was at the beginning. So, one of the things that we worried about way back in the day, or I shouldn't say way back in the day, but in the 2010s, we worried a lot about like how there was that huge spike in editors, and then it sort of started tapering off. The current staff, it looks like they've stabilized things. So now in 2022, it's about the same as it was back in 2012, which is good. It's still a useful resource. It's still a top 10 website. It's in good shape. And editing Wikipedia is really easy. And if you go to the website, and I'm going to try sharing this briefly. Let's see if I can pull this off. So if you go to the main website, what you'll see is something that looks like this. You'll see the main web page, and over to the left, you'll see this Learn to Edit button. And if you click on that, you'll see this Introduction to Wikipedia with a big Get Started button. And the documentation is pretty good there, but certainly, but there's a lot more to be said there. So I'm just going to leave it at that and switch back over to my slides. And all right. And one thing that's super easy about using Wikipedia, and why it's not a big deal, like, go ahead and edit, because undoing damage is also super easy. So yeah, I'm just putting out a dare to you all, like, go ahead and revert some of the stuff that I said. Some of the stuff that I've said is probably not very good. So yeah, it probably deserves to be reverted. But give it a shot. There are things that I know more than I should about. So, but still, who knows? Like, maybe you know more. At the same time, assume good faith. So if somebody else reverts you, if somebody else undoes your work, like, don't take it the wrong way. I mean, it very well could be that the person who reverted you is a jerk, is trying to be a jerk, is a mean person, but it could be that, it's just a robot that's just trying to fix things up, and it has a bug in it, or whatever, or maybe the other editor's just a little bit tired and it's just like, I don't want to deal with this, like, and they're a little bit cranky, or maybe they just expect a little bit more of you because you like haven't read all of the documentation, and Lord knows there is a ton of documentation to read. But regardless, like just try to assume good faith. And don't be afraid to ask. So earlier you see I referred to Burlington, right? Well, which Burlington am I referring to? Well, sometimes those of us who edit Wikipedia, we're not good at communicating what we're talking about. So it's always good to give to ask questions, and even if even if it seems like a dumb question, it's probably not. So and be bold, like, cite your sources, but don't be afraid to take out, like, what, if you see something that looks, that's just wrong, that's not something that should be on Wikipedia, like, try taking it off, see what happens. Somebody will probably notice, but if you're reasonably confident that, like, what that thing is wrong, then take it off. And make sure you check your sources, though. Just don't, basically, like, don't add nonsense of your own. Finally, let's see here. So one of the things I was going to do was describe how to use Python to edit Wikipedia, because I know that this is a pretty Python-heavy crowd. I didn't get around to it. Sorry. But there's a wonderful little library called pywikibot that I encourage any of y'all who understand Python to, like, check out as a means of interacting with Wikipedia. There's plenty of other libraries, though. It's like pywikibot's not the only one. And there are bots in plenty of other languages as well. Editing Wikipedia without programming is really what this talk was meant to be about, and what the heck, I'm just going to do it right now. So I'm going to go to my user page on Wikipedia and make a change here live in real time. What the heck? I'm just going to edit. I'm going to edit. So there's two buttons up here. There's an edit source and just a plain old edit. Edit just means to use the visual editor. Edit source means to use the wiki source, that is Wikitext markup, to which then gets turned into the Wikipedia article. But I'm going to switch to the edit, the visual editor, and just say, well, what the heck? Even more information can be found on my homepage. And I'm going to hit publish, and saying even more instead of more. Publish. Okay, there we go. And voila, there it is. That's how it's done. And I see from the chat that there's a much more prolific editor than I am who put in a message there. But I got questions for y'all. So what do you want? What do you need to know? What do you want to learn about? Please let me know. That is...
If you have any questions, you can just put them on the chat and Rob will answer your questions.
Okay, so Aravind asked, when an edit happens, is it immediate or does it go into the queue for editor review? It's almost always immediate, is the short answer. There are some pages, very few, like I would say at least 98% of the pages are set up such that the changes you make immediately get published. There are a few pages that are under what's called a feature on English Wikipedia called pending changes, which has a review queue, but there are very few pages that are put under pending changes on English Wikipedia. Other Wikipedias, the feature is called flagged revs. Either way, though, the sort of review queue aspect of it is an exception rather than the rule. Does that answer things, Aravind? Any other questions?
I have a question, Rob.
Yeah.
Given that the editing is almost immediately, and as you've said, sometimes someone will just edit some maybe wrong information because they are just bad people. So how is that like combated or something, given that maybe your article was way better or it had all the facts that were needed?
It often is a matter of persistence. So sometimes, so I'll go to one of the more controversial articles that I've been involved with, which is big tech. Let's see here. So, and in many ways, I'm not happy with some of the ways that this article has gone, but it's like life goes on. It's okay. I think the article is in reasonable shape. But to answer your question, Beryl, like there's currently a debate as to whether or not Microsoft is part of big tech, which cracks me up because I think it's obvious that Microsoft is part of big tech, but yet there's a quote here that's over 10 years old that says Microsoft is not driving the consumer revolution in the mind of consumers, right? Okay, well, that was from Eric Schmidt, who is the former CEO of Google. He's a little biased, but yet there we have it. Like that's that's like basically in the name of neutrality, like both Big Four and Big Five are treated equivalently. So so there's a ton of a ton of information there that's like not necessarily, like basically it takes a bit of persistence to keep, if you have a very strongly held opinion, you need to kind of stick with it. So and then Rashama just asked I'll get back to Ervin's question after Rashama. So can you show us again how to see who has contributed to a page, equivalent to git blame on GitHub? Perfect. Okay, so let's take a look at this the big tech article, for example. So what I'm going to do is up at the top of the page, you'll see there is a view history link. And if you click on that link, what you'll see is a linear history. And that's one of the things that's a little bit different than Git. Is with Git, you can have a history that branches, that there are several different branches, that it can get kind of complicated. Wikipedia's histories are much simpler. They're just simple linear histories. So that actually makes reviewing harder, or excuse me, that makes like the process of setting up those review queues I was talking about earlier, the pending changes feature. That feature basically holds back an article to an earlier revision until an editor approves the latest revision. But here is, so we'll just take a look at this very last edit that was made on April 3rd, 2022. We'll look at the difference with the previous revision, and there's two buttons up here. You can see there's a Wikitext and a visual version. We're going to look at the Wikitext version first. We're going to see that somebody added a citation here to one of the paragraphs, where I'm going to scroll back up and look at the visual difference, and this could take a little bit longer. There we go. Okay, so you can see here there are two more footnotes that show up because of that change, and down below you can see what those footnotes are. And to answer Rashama's follow-up question, the format, so Markdown, I think, was inspired by Wikitext, not the other way around. So basically, I believe Markdown was created around 2004, and MediaWiki, the site software, and the Wikitext markup was started around 2001. It is there. Markdown, RST, and the Wikitext that you see on Wikipedia are all sort of spiritual siblings, and the but it's spiritual, not literal. So there are some differences when you look at that markup. When you look at Wikitext markup, it looks very similar to Markdown, but it's not the same. And then there was Ervin's question that second question, what is the process to make sure that the information is authoritative, true, and not being hijacked by people with an agenda? The short answer is it can be hijacked by people with an agenda. Generally speaking, there's enough people out there that are not willing to let it get hijacked by people with an agenda. And those people, by far and away, have been more persistent. But that is always in a danger with Wikipedia, is that you know, because there are 6 million articles on English Wikipedia alone, when you look at an English Wikipedia article, you always have to take it with a grain of salt. You always have to look at the citations. As a reader, there's a little bit more responsibility that's explicitly placed on you versus as a reader of a book, you can kind of assume, well, the publisher should know what they're doing. Well, I mean, oftentimes books are published by people with an agenda too. So, all right. Okay, so has Wikipedia been able to avoid the dilemma of fake news? Yes and no. Certainly, fake news is a problem for Wikipedia, just like it is for everybody else. I think the processes, so the editing community of Wikipedia is really good at pushing back on fake news, generally speaking. But like I was saying before, it's the onus is still a little bit on the reader to check what they're reading, because who knows? It's not immune to it. It's just done a pretty good job of avoiding the problem. All right, so I'm going to read Robin Stanley Taylor's. So Robin Stanley Taylor is the person who is much more prolific than I am. So let's see here. So, and probably knows more about this than I do, but well, I'm going to read the question. So it was a big scandal a while back that the Scots Wikipedia was mostly written by one American teenager using Google Translate. Allegedly, a different small wiki, Lithuanian, not sure, was captured for a time by neo-Nazis. I don't remember that scandal specifically. I mean, I sort of remember the Scots Wikipedia scandal. But yeah, Robin may be the better person to ask about all of this stuff. I think the bigger the wiki, the more eyeballs and the more people that are looking at it. So that's one of the reasons why English Wikipedia is the 800-pound gorilla, is because it is by far and away the most popular of the wikis, and therefore has enough pushback against bad things happening. The Scots Wikipedia was a pretty small wiki, so I think that was the reason why one teenager was able to pull it off. is because most people just weren't looking in that area. And then Ervin asks, as an editor or contributor, how do you handle copyrighted materials such as images that need to be included for context? So different language Wikipedias have different policies. So English Wikipedia is probably like a little bit more forgiving of allowing copyrighted material, like material that is not copyrighted under the Creative Commons license to be used under the American legal provision for fair use. So fair use basically says that that if you're basically providing an image or something for the purposes of education or discussing something, you can reproduce it, and therefore there's plenty of images on English Wikipedia that are marked as fair use, or like that are basically that are under restrictive copyrights and yet are allowed on English Wikipedia through that fair use, through the use of fair use. But other Wikipedias are a little bit more strict and only allow for specifically compatible licenses to be used on images and everything else. I hope that answers your question, Aravind, or at least as much as it can be. I am not a lawyer. I suppose I should have prefaced what I said by, I am not a lawyer. Any other questions?
So maybe I could just ask one last question before we wrap it up, because it seems that. So I know Wikipedia hosts articles from very many fields like science, mathematics, physics, etc. So some of those fields really need expert knowledge or domain knowledge, for example, because some of them have to be backed up by evidence or results from laboratories or something like that. So given that Wikipedia is open to anyone for contribution or editing, how do you guys go about that? Or how does Wikipedia go about that, given that not everyone who edits has the expert knowledge? Or do they just assume that you wouldn't edit a physics related article if you have no knowledge in physics?
I think the latter, what you just said, Beryl, is pretty much what happens is that by and large, they're basically, most of the time when somebody does not have expertise in physics, they're not interested in physics and therefore are not interested in editing articles. And I think that's what how folks that's partly how folks stay in their lane, so to speak. Is that they'll typically, like, just human behavior. Most folks will will stay with what they know. But I think that has always been the paradox of Wikipedia, is the fact that like folks who are not experts in things still edit things. And uh, and by and large, I mean, it's one of those things that shouldn't work and yet does. I think people are willing, like basically, I've learned so much myself on things that I'm not an expert on, um, by posting. So actually, let me back up, and I think I know a better way of answering your question, Beryl, which is um, the original inventor of the wiki is a man named Ward Cunningham, and there's a there's a law called Cunningham's law, which basically says that the best way to get the correct answer to a question is not to ask for the not to ask what the what you want to know about, but to post the wrong information on the internet, and somebody will swoop in and correct it. So the wikis are kind of built on this paradox of like, you know, posting bad information in hopes that somebody will see it and say that's not right and fix it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Because I think there is a universal human instinct when people see like something wrong, it's like I have to fix it. And in fact, there's a comic named XKCD, which has a very famous thing. Basically, you know, somebody staying up late saying it's like, somebody's wrong on the internet. I must fix this. Sorry, can't get away. So yeah, I think that's what causes wikis to work, is bad information that somebody feels the urge to fix.
Yeah, okay. I think you answered my question, and we do not have any other questions, so we can wrap up. I would like to thank you for your talk. It's really informative, and hopefully, more people and data scientists can now start editing Wikipedia and help it grow. For everyone who joined us, thank you. And we will have a video on this webinar up in our YouTube channel in the next 24 hours. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.